This is Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast where we bring Jesus into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Hey guys, welcome to the show. I am Jason. This is Sports Spectrum. Our website, of course, sportspectrum.com is a great place to go for all of our content. Check it out at sportspectrum.com. If you have a guest idea, a show topic, maybe a story that you want to pitch, you can email me directly. Jason@sportspectrum.com is my email address, jason@sportspectrum.com. We would love to hear from you. Make sure you're following us on our social media pages as well, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We also have a great YouTube channel where all of our podcasts are available, plus a ton of other video content and testimonials and stories from NFL players and other people in the world of sports. Check out our YouTube channel. Just search Sports Spectrum. And our show today is presented by IJM, the International Justice Mission. You can check them out at ijm.org/TF. You can be a part of Team Freedom and become a freedom partner, joining the fight to end slavery in our lifetime. We love the International Justice Mission and the work that they do. It's so important, helping to protect more than 150 million people around the world from violence and oppression. Check it out at ijm.org/TF and support the International Justice Mission. We're also presented today by Compassion International. We love what they stand for, releasing children from poverty. And because of COVID-19, there's children around the world who are not only living in poverty, but it's gone from, just being hungry to starvation. The pandemic has magnified their needs, and these are children that are in crisis right now, and families as well. And so Compassion has stepped up. They're doing something about it with Fill the Stadium. You got to check it out, fillthestadium.com, to learn more and to partner with Compassion and professional athletes to help fill the stadium. This is a stadium that can't remain empty. So check it out at fillthestadium.com to give right now. fillthestadium.com. Today on Sports Spectrum, we hear the story of Tim Johnson. Tim is a former NFL defensive lineman, actually a former college football defensive lineman as well. Played his college ball at Penn State under Joe Paterno, a member of the 1986 Penn State National Championship team, and then was selected in the 6th round of the 1987 NFL draft by the Pittsburgh Steelers. Played a few years in Pittsburgh and then moved to Washington. And in 1991, he was a member of the Joe Gibbs-led then Washington Redskins Super Bowl team that beat the Buffalo Bills and won Super Bowl 26. So Tim Johnson, not only a college football national champion, he is a Super Bowl champion as well. And the Pro Bowl called his name in 1993, and he retired in 1996 after one final year with the Cincinnati Bengals. And most guys, when they retire, what's that transition look like, right, into the real world? Well, Tim transitioned a little bit differently. He became an ordained minister and is currently a pastor, the founding pastor of Orlando World Outreach Center in Orlando, Florida. So this is a great conversation, not only talking to Tim about his football journey, winning college, winning NFL championships, but then going into ministry. But we also talk about a really important topic on this show, and that's the fatherless generation. It's an epidemic that's going on around this country, and a lot of kids growing up without dads. And Tim was one of those people. I was one of those people. And we're pretty passionate about this. And he has a heart for men and the fatherless generation. We talked to Tim about that as well. Let's take a listen to Tim Johnson, the pastor and former NFL defensive lineman, Super Bowl champion, college football champion, joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. Tim, good to have you here, buddy. Good to have you on the show.
Jason, thank you for the privilege of being here.
That's good. Let's start with some fun on the field. I thought in doing my research, I read that you had one career interception, and it was in that 1991 Super Bowl season. So you're a D lineman. You don't get a lot of chances for an interception. Do you remember that play? Tell us what happened.
Oh, do I ever. It was as much of a shock to me as anybody in the whole stadium. It was sort of like an out-of-body experience because there's no expectation I had going into any game that the ball would be close to my hands, except if it was in the running back or the quarterback's hands or some other offensive players. So been playing football a long time. And it was the craziest thing. Somehow the ball, after the play started, the ball popped up. And it was almost like I couldn't drop it.
Mm-hmm.
It was so surreal. Everything kind of just was so calculated. It was like a video game. And bam, the ball's in my hands. And I'm like, oh my goodness. I had to think fast. Like, what do I do? I know, run.
Yes.
Run for my life.
Yeah.
And if there was ever one of those dreams where you feel like you're running in molasses and that you are moving but going nowhere, I think that was the reality of my interception. I felt like I was moving in slow motion. And to prove that I was probably right, they caught me real fast. I ran 14 yards, but I think I fell 7 of it.
Did you get a game ball? Did they give you the football?
I got a game ball for I think it was that game. I know I got a couple game balls from my career from Philly, but it was surreal and I think that was the only interception I had.
From what I did my research, I don't know if Google.com is true, but it said one
That's
career
true this
interception.
time.
So
And it was one to remember. Oh, no. It was one to forget.
One to forget. That's right. Well, it didn't lead to a season that was forgetful because you guys won a Super Bowl that year in 1991 with Washington. You played under Coach Gibbs. What was he like to play for? I've talked to many people. We've actually had him on this show as well. A gentle giant. I got to spend a day with him at ESPN, I want to say 10, 11 years ago. He was the real deal. What was it like to play for Coach Gibbs?
Those are very appropriate words, Jason. Coach Gibbs was the real deal. He was so gifted as a leader. And a lot of times people can be gifted in things and let the gift operate in the way that it does, but not maximize the gift. And what I mean by that is you got a lot of gifted people who do it and they make it look easier than anyone else. But if you're gifted and you work hard, then you become superior and you become stellar. Coach Gibbs had a gift of leadership. He just knew how to put personalities together. He knew how to drive us toward a standard, toward a mark, visionary, being able to create an environment that everyone was everyone from the people answering the phones to the star quarterback making gazillions of dollars. You were valued. The room for the gospel was made. By the way, I had never seen an NFL do chapel service like at that time, the Washington team.
What was that like?
Joe Gibbs would be, in other organizations, you'll have either chapel the night before or chapel the day of the game, and you get a little room for your service, and you'll have a chapel speaker come in there, and it's on the clock. Boom, boom, boom. And so every home game, my time with Coach Gibbs in Washington, he would, and by the way, in those other organizations where they had chapel services, it was just the players. You couldn't bring family or friends. Maybe there's an exception for a superstar if he wanted to bring a friend, but it was just exclusively us. So I go into Washington, coming out of Pittsburgh, and the first chapel service, there's a big buffet in the hall, first of all, big buffet. The room is set up like a church service. I mean, you got the chairs, you got a little stage, sound system, praise and worship. He was on the front row. Families could come, friends could come. It blew my mind. Honestly, it blew my mind. I'm thinking, who does this? But Coach Gibbs was par excellence in every single thing he did, which is why he had the bar so high for his expectations for us to do our job, because there was a lot of benefits. Yes, he was very gifted, just intuitive, just a true man of God leading quite an eclectic group of personalities, which takes a gift in and of itself. But man, did those guys work hard. And he's one of my heroes. Coach Gibbs he knew how to get more out of a team than just about any coach that I've been around. I mean, other than Joe Paterno at Penn State.
Well, I mean, in those years, 1990 is when you got to Washington. I mean, the NFC East won the Super Bowl 4 straight years, 90, 91, 92, 93, between Dallas, the Giants, and you guys. So you're going up against a juggernaut every single year. It feels like that has a Super Bowl chance, right?
Yes, that's absolutely right. The competition in the East at that time was superior to any other division. And what we realized is if you make it out of our division, there's a good chance you can beat everybody else.
Yeah.
Because of the level of coaching, skill, talent, intensity of all of our matchups. I mean, it didn't matter who you matched up with, Philly and us in New York and the Cowboys. However, it was just every week it was going to be a war. And you get used to that so that those who are not used to those kinds of intense battles, they may not handle it as well.
Mm-hmm. Tim Johnson's our guest here on Sports Spectrum. So it's been, 24 years since you last played a football game. How's your body feel today? I'm always curious when I talk to someone. Do you feel the NFL, career still to when you wake up each day?
I am so grateful to Jesus and his grace and his ability to keep me. I've had my physical battles over the years, like real intense physical battles. But of late, I'm doing fairly well. I'm doing as well as anybody else my age, I think, and maybe doing better than most people my age that didn't play in the NFL. And so, because I still walk quite extensively and half the time eating right, and the other half, I don't know what I'm doing.
There's grace for that, though, Tim. There's grace for that.
Yeah, that's grace for that. That's right. That's right. I like that. And so I get out of the bed and I'm moving around, and I'm not involved in a lot of heavy lifting type activities. So there's no demand on my body that I don't voluntarily put on it, as far as any walking long distances and things like that. So grace.
Lots of grace. Absolutely. So you grew up in Sarasota, right? That's where you grew up. And as far as I know, Dad was not in the picture for you, correct?
Correct. I grew up in Sarasota, Florida, and a place that houses a lot of pretty tremendous athletes. And it was, kind of a rocky start, not even knowing the possibilities that existed in sports, because everything would happen in the neighborhood. This, whether it's football or whatever, getting in trouble, playing in the graveyard, or going to cow tipping in the cow fields, whatever it was just all in the neighborhood. Until one day my friend introduced me to a Little League football program outside of the neighborhood. And through negotiating with my mom, and negotiating meaning begging her, she allowed me to play. And that opened up a whole new world. And so growing up without my biological father was something that I think I overlooked it. It was convenient to overlook it because I didn't have it. Mm-hmm. And one of the things growing up that I never wanted to project is that I was needy. I never wanted to be needy, or I trusted me. So if I couldn't get it done, obviously you need mom and there are things you can't do for yourself, but I pretty much didn't want to need somebody who wasn't there. I didn't know the impact that was having on me, which there was an impact, but at the end of the day, I didn't want to need somebody who wasn't there. So I looked at my mom as the anchor in my life, and the coaches, I looked at them as surrogates, and I think that supplemented some of my needing to have my earthly father with me. And so I was buffeted to some extent. And I think with my personality of being driven to whatever I'm going to do, I just want to do it with all I got. I just didn't have a neutral or throttling down mindset. So being able to always have something to go for and achieve and get better at kept me preoccupied a bit. So, I mean, I would see my neighbor, they would have a dad at the house, which wasn't the dominant family unit, in my neighborhood, but there was some dads here and there. And us kids who didn't, we just had each other and we rolled as we rolled. So
when did you realize that not having a dad in your life was a void in your life? Was it not until you got into college, maybe even after? For me, it really didn't hit until I was in my 30s when my dad was around, but he wasn't present in my life. He couldn't stay sober and he had a lot of issues going. I've written about that in my book, but it wasn't until I was in my 30s that I recognized there was a void when I was younger that I should have had in my life. When did that happen for you?
I would say college, Jason, because up until college, I didn't know of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Just didn't know. We lived how non-believers who live in sin live,
of course,
and know how to sin real good. So it was quite a journey getting to the place where the gospel was preached to me, which put some walls up in my heart because it was so foreign. It was so extreme. And it put a lot of fear in me because I knew I couldn't live right. I knew there was nothing in me that could come out of sin. And so part of me felt like, well, I've seen hypocrites before and definitely never want to be that. So I probably should just stay as I am because I don't know God, but if he's real, he probably is not somebody to play around with. So somewhere in my mind, I did kind of make that connection. And so the gospel consistently was presented to me in different ways through, providential meetings with campus workers or my roommate whose parents signed him up to be followed up by a pastor our freshman year, being on the phone with that pastor lying for my roommate, and so all kinds of stuff. But long story short, I end up in a meeting where I'm hearing the gospel with a whole bunch of questions in my mind that I don't have answers for, tried to answer, couldn't answer. So I just kept living in sin and thought, I'm not having enough fun. Why am I thinking about who God is? Why am I thinking about why am I here? What's my purpose in life? Never had those questions before. I think it was a touch from the divine. God says, I'm gonna lovingly draw you to me. And so as he did that, I ended up in a meeting where I had a chance to ask these questions. And I'll never forget, it was Todd Blackledge and I think Leo Wisniewski held a meeting with some of the Penn State football players. And we would listen to those guys at any moment because they were our heroes. They were in the pros. They were where we wanted to be. So all of us are just really kind of groupies gawking at these guys. But Todd just spoke the truth. He spoke the word. He preached to us. And I don't think I'd ever seen anything like this because he had a Bible in his hand and he was speaking, and sometimes he wouldn't look at it. He would talk as if he knew what he was saying. And he would quote Bible verses without looking down. I was fascinated. I was like, whoa, that's so crazy. And somewhere in me, I realized that was my life. But it scared me because I knew I couldn't do it on my own. And so I ended up saying yes to Jesus. And after many toils and trials, he came into my life, filled me with his power. I began to live for him. When I graduated from college, I was in Pittsburgh. We used to drive 3.5 hours back to church in State College, Pennsylvania, because that's where my local church was. I had my leadership training on Saturday mornings, go to church, get in the car, go back, and we would do that every weekend. Well, one particular weekend, we do what we had been doing for months. Saturday morning, the pastor's there, a small group of us, young people. We get in a circle and pray, and we get in a circle, and before I know it, I'm on the ground in the fetal position, and it's freaking me out. I'm in the fetal position, wailing, and I don't know why. So it was odd because I'm down here, I'm crying and moaning and asking myself at the same time, what are you doing? Why are you down here? And the pastor comes over and says, is everything okay? And then here comes this explosion of, I never had a father. I never had a father. I didn't much care, I guess, up to that point. I didn't live every day thinking about this, but I didn't know that I was living like an orphan. I was living like an orphan. It came out in my anger. It came out in my selfishness. It came out in the way of not knowing how to be faithful to one woman before I got married. And then, not knowing how to treat the woman that I did marry. And it just came out in so many ways that I adapted my whole life to thinking that this was just me. But when Jesus opened up that well for me to get delivered and free, it wasn't until then that I realized, wow, so all those banquets, I had so many different All-American this and All-State this banquets in high school. Where was he? It was just my mom. There's nobody there. And what's wrong with me? I've been on television. I've, done all kinds of stuff. Like, was there something wrong with me? And so all this stuff starts to come up, and it was a mighty deliverance is all I can say. I did not know I needed to be set free from trusting me and suppressing my need for a father.
Do you see that with the different people? I know your heart is for the fatherless generation. You have a heart for men. Do you see a similarity with a lot of the guys that you talk to and minister to?
Yes. There's all kinds of things. See, I believe it's been said that there's a hole in the soul of every child in the shape of their dad. And that God whispers in the womb of that mother to say to that child, there's this guy who's waiting for you, to love you, to protect you, to understand you, to see you, to provide for you, to guide you, to give you your name. Called your dad. And then when that baby's born and that man is not there or not available or is there but absent, that hole doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. It causes a wound in the soul of that child. And anybody that's wounded that doesn't know how to get healed will, it's not an option, you will self-medicate. There's a lot of men self-medicating in the name of making themselves something, trying to satisfy through sex or excessive pursuits of wealth and fame and branding and notoriety, alcohol, whatever it may be. I'm trying to make myself, tell myself I'm something. But it's interesting how you can tell yourself all day long who you are, and it won't compare to a father telling you who you are. There's no comparison. And there's a lot of men who've been wounded. Sometimes being wounded is not what people do to you. It's what people don't do for you. The wound, unfortunately, with a lot of men, yes, comes from what fathers have done to them, but a lot of them are wounded because of what a father has not done for them. And so, yes, you look at the rate of fatherless children, that shows you the orphan spirit. You look at the rate of incarceration, suicide, teenage pregnancy. All of these are if fatherlessness was a disease, it would be categorically a crisis. It would be at a crisis level. It would be like a pandemic in the world today, because everything is touched and influenced by men. Look at the successful men on Wall Street. Self-medicating, orphan spirit, don't feel like they belong, don't know what to believe, and they don't know how to behave. So you wrap yourself into all your possessions, and what you do, you wrap yourself in the identity you make for yourself, and then you maintain that way of life, all the while suppressing the reality that you have no idea what you're doing in life. You feel like an imposter. You have no idea what you're doing. You never tell anybody that, but you have no idea.
Quick break from our conversation to tell you about IJM, the International Justice Mission, sponsors and partners with us here at Sports Spectrum, believing every person deserves to be safe and free from violence. The International Justice Mission, partnering with local authorities to rescue victims of violence, bring criminals to justice, restoring survivors, and strengthening justice systems. They are helping to protect IJM as more than 150 million people around the world from violence and oppression. But it's work that they cannot do alone. They need your help. They need our help, the help of Freedom Partners, some of IJM's most loyal partners in the work of justice. And their support of $24 or more each month helps survivors of slavery and violence from the moment they're rescued until they are fully restored. You can join the fight right now to end slavery in our lifetime by visiting the website ijm.org/TF to become a Freedom Partner today. ijm.org/TF. We're also presented today by Compassion International, the most trusted child development ministry in the world. And Compassion right now has a great initiative called Fill the Stadium. And I want you to think about this. COVID-19, right? It's left so many in crisis, but it's left children around the world who are living in poverty in deep, deep trouble. Issues of food have gone from hunger to starvation. The pandemic has magnified these needs. And think about Compassion and what they're about, right? This past spring, most of the events that Compassion International relies on to help sponsor these children in crisis were canceled due to COVID-19. And it's left nearly 70,000 kids in desperate need of help. Well, 70,000 also happens to be the average size of many pro football stadiums that were once filled and now sit mostly empty. Each of these 70,000 empty seats represents a child in crisis who needs you, who needs us to step up and fill the stadium. Here's what you can do. Go to the website, fillthestadium.com. That's the website, fillthestadium.com. You can team up with Compassion International and their pro athlete friends to help these kids in crisis. This is a stadium that cannot remain empty. Go to fillthestadium.com, click Give Now, and help release these kids from poverty in Jesus' name. Fillthestadium.com. Tim Johnson is joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. How does a former football player, Pro Bowler, Super Bowl champ, college football champ end up as a pastor, Tim? Like, how does that happen?
When you figure that out, please come tell me. Jason, I tell you, I can say very plainly, it was not my plan.
Right.
It was not my plan. You know, I went through high school, college, football, played in the NFL, football. But at the end of my career, I wanted to go to law school. So my goal was to prepare the last year or two, which I had my last year. In my last year, I was with Cincinnati and I was preparing to go back to the Northern Virginia, DC area. So I had at a mentor at George Mason set up, and I just knew this was going to be my pursuit because I wanted to go to law school so I can become a judge. I always felt like the real hinges to people's lives and future were in a courtroom. But in a court, that's where the real game is played. For cultures and communities, and those who are underserved. There's just so much that needs to be made right. And I just wanted to be a part. I want to be in the game. But they say if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. So I had a 3-year plan. I had a 5-year plan written out, and it's in a book somewhere. And God just tapped Gabriel and said, look at him. They just belly laughed over all my great plans, and none of my plans were bad. And he called me to Nashville, Tennessee. I don't sing, I'm not musical, but he called me to Nashville, Tennessee to pastor with Dr. Rice Brooks, who wrote God's Not Dead and did the movies and all that, to serve under him for 7 years. I'm a pastor. It was uncomfortable. When people would call me pastor, I'm like, I don't need a title. You don't have to. Somebody had to tell me it's not for me, it's for the people. Because if you got a bunch of people and the church grew to be pretty big, people don't know who people are. So if they're saying pastor, then it gives a point of identification. So I accepted it, but I don't need that, but it's more for the people to, again, identify. And I'm cool with it. But it was uncomfortable because I didn't predict that I would be in this world. But I told Jesus when he saved my life at Penn State, yes, whatever you ask me, my answer is yes first. And then you show me how to walk in obedience. So my answer was yes. And he did a lot of work on me to prepare me for what I was headed into, as well as my wife. And I wouldn't change anything about it, but it was really God's assignment, not my choice.
Well, I say, if you're a Christian and you pray that prayer that Jesus prayed, when he's about to go to the cross the next day, and he says, not my will, but yours be done, even though he says, take this cup away from me. When we pray that, I tell people that's the most dangerous prayer you can pray, because when you submit to God's will, he'll take you to places that might not be in your plans, but we got to be okay with that, right?
Yes, sir. That is true as true can be, because I have experienced that. Not only were we in Nashville 7 years, but I thought we were going to be there for the duration until the Lord returns and we go to him. Well, 7 years in, or 6 years in, because it took us a year and a half to transition, but I get a call from God. It's a deep, it was him. It's all I could say, to plant a church in Orlando, Florida. And we're just really getting going in Nashville. We were in the midst of a multi-million-dollar building expansion campaign. I'm in the middle of that. Funny how the Lord never asked us if now is a good time. He just doesn't ask, because it was not a good time in the natural. So much was hinging on my being there. And so he calls us to plant a church in Orlando. And that was another, tears, not understanding, confirmation needed, confirmation given over and over again. And so it was a yes, Lord, but we really need your help on this one. And he did, and we transitioned. And the thing is, we planted this church with a full staff and no members.
Wow.
Which is a miracle.
Yeah.
It was a step of faith God called me to make. It's amazing when you walk by faith and you know it's the Lord. It's not your voice sounding like God because it's something you want. He's not obligated to anything but his word. When you know his word, wherever God guides, he will always provide. And he has abundantly and miraculously with his grace.
Are you comfortable being called pastor now? Or are we over that yet?
I think I'm good now, Jason. I'm good. Yeah, I'm good.
That's
I
good.
got my freedom.
All right. Well, Pastor Tim Johnson's joining us on the show today. I want to ask you about, just as we wind down here, maybe some fun football memories. Your Super Bowl run with Washington when you guys beat Buffalo, and Buffalo was, I believe, in the second year of a 4 straight year run to the Super Bowl, but
Yes.
then ended up losing all four. Can you give me your favorite memory from that Super Bowl? What stands out? Because by that time, the Super Bowl was established in terms of how big it was. You know, it wasn't like in the early
Yeah.
stages. It was a big deal. What's your favorite memory from that game?
Well, it's kind of a fun fact that when we went on the field to play against their offense as defense, we were quite surprised that their star running back was not in the game. We thought it was a trick play. We didn't know what they were up to. It was shocking
Thurman
because he was
Thomas,
one
right?
of the best players. Yes, Thurman Thomas. It was a shock. So we're playing the game and we're doing good, wondering why is he not in the game? Well, he eventually comes in the game, like in the second series. Come to find out that my man couldn't find his helmet.
I remember that.
He couldn't find his helmet. And I love telling that story because as much as the coaches loved him, as much as the players were for him, as much as he knew his playbook and the fans all wanted him to block, everybody wanted him to be on the field. He could not go on the field because it was dangerous and it was against the rules. The referee wouldn't let him to be on the field. And my illustration of that to people is as much as people love you, as much as your family supports you, as much as everybody around wants you into heaven, you can't get into heaven without the helmet of salvation.
Mm-hmm.
And only Jesus can give you that.
Mm.
So that was a fun fact, just how, the biggest game of the year. You, as a kid, you prepared for this for like years. And you missed the start of the biggest moment of the year, honestly. And
Yes.
so that was fun. And then obviously winning and not realizing this is unreal to be in a Super Bowl. I'm from Sarasota, Florida. What am I doing here?
Mm.
So much comes back like a rush. It just rushes on you. All these memories and thoughts, all this stuff just kind of hits you like a ton of bricks. And it's just humbling. It's so humbling.
You won it in college too with Penn State. Is there a comparison on the experience and can you pick one over the other in terms of in terms of the enjoyment of it? Is that possible?
It's not possible, Jason, only because there were two different worlds.
Yeah.
Two completely different worlds. Being a kid, from Sarasota in college, I'm still, teenager. No, I think I was 20 at that time, but I'm beginning life. Like this is starting a whole new world for me. And to have Miami come in and basically pose as the Japanese, and they're going to bomb us like the Japanese bombed the Americans at Pearl Harbor, was something that left the game at another level of intensity. It was fever pitched. All of the personalities, the media coverage, it was crazy. To come out of that game and to have 3 plays from the last play of the game, I come around the corner and I snatch Vinny Testaverde off of his feet. 2 plays later, the game's over.
Mm-hmm.
It's indescribable. The people, the rush of people on the field, it was indescribable. I don't think there was anything like that. But then the Super Bowl was a whole nother level because there was a lot at stake there too. But 2 different experiences, both quite dream status.
That's awesome. He is Tim Johnson, the former NFL defensive lineman, college football champ, NFL champ, Pro Bowler. We must mention you were a Pro Bowler in 1993.
Well, I was
well.
I was Sports Illustrated All Pro. They didn't vote me to the Pro Bowl, but the Sports Illustrated All Pro was more. It was a little more special because the Pro Bowl includes AFC and NFC. Sports Illustrated was more prestigious because it was combined and they built one team.
Okay.
And me and Cortez Kennedy were the two tackles, which that was a big honor. So
It's a big deal.
it seemed more prestigious to me, even though it would have been nice to go to Hawaii.
It's a big, sure. Well, we could all go to Hawaii right now and enjoy it, I'm sure. Tim, as we wind down, we asked this question. It's the last question I have for you. It's a question we ask all of our guests on the show. But 2020 has been insane, right? It's been crazy. It's forced us all to pivot. It's brought a lot of unrest for some of us, wrestling through our own fears, doubts, prejudices, all of that. But here we are. It's at the end of the year. And we can look back now and say, okay, we're still going through this pandemic, but we learned a lot. So what's the lesson, the great lesson the Lord has shown you and taught you as you look back on 2020?
I think if I had to put it in one word, it would be a reset. And the reset would be reconsidering all the things that we held as idols, all the things that we trusted in, and believed that we were really trusting in God. Mm-hmm. You look at the silence of all of our favorite things, movies, sports, television. There's a moment where the whole world was silent. And 2020 was supposed to be a year of clear vision. Except we didn't really prepare ourselves for God to show us everything, right down to the wickedness in our own heart as a nation.
Wow.
To see May 25th happen and a black man is aborted, crucified, lynched, murdered by the one who was supposed to help him, set a whole different tone for the Lord, I believe, to say, you want to see? Do you really want to see? I'm showing you everything. It's been a year like no other, where God has caused things to come to the surface that have been hidden for years and generations. And the lesson for me and the thing that I believe is made clear is this: do you actually want to deal with it? Because if you don't deal with it, it can actually get worse. From our ethnic tensions to how we worship, to who we believe Jesus is, to preaching the gospel. Are we going to be put off because our idols have been silent, or are we going to seek the Lord while he may be found?
That's well said. Tim Johnson, this has been great, my friend. Thanks for coming on the show. Great to connect with you. I'm sure we'll have you on again. And I didn't realize your daughter works at ESPN as well. So hopefully she's listening to this. We give her a little shout out as well. But thanks so much, my friend. Thanks so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
God bless you.
And many thanks to Tim Johnson, the pastor and former NFL defensive lineman, Super Bowl champ, college football champ. We thank Tim for joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. We also thank you for listening. And of course, our partners and sponsors today for today's show. We thank them as well. The International Justice Mission. Check them out at ijm.org/TF to become a freedom partner. And Compassion International and Fill the Stadium and what they're doing right now to release kids from poverty. So important. Check out fillthestadium.com to learn more about Compassion's initiative. Fillthestadium.com. We also want to direct you to our website, sportspectrum.com, and make sure whatever app you're listening to this podcast on right now, you click that subscribe button. That way you never miss an episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast. And of course, now we are part of the Sports Spectrum Podcast Network. Have you listened to the other shows on our network? Well, we got a couple we want to suggest. The first one is a brand new one called Recalibrated, hosted by Mallory Brown. And this is for the women, specifically geared towards the women in sports. And guys, you can listen to it too, because it's really good. And it's a great perspective, a refreshing perspective from Mallory Brown and the people that she's interviewing. A lot of them are wives and girlfriends of different NFL and other athletes. And it's just a fresh perspective, a unique perspective, really all centered around Romans 12:2 and being recalibrated in our life, telling the recalibrated story. So make sure you check out Recalibrated, brand new podcast. It's available now everywhere podcasts are found. Make sure you subscribe and download Recalibrated. And lastly, on the Sports Spectrum Podcast Network, make sure you're listening to Table 40. It's hosted by Matt Holliday, the 8-time MLB All-Star, and his wife Leslie. And that's a show that's been around now for 7 or 8 months, but it's still just picking up steam. I got to tell you, that show Table 40 is really good because it's hosted by an MLB player, a former MLB player, and his wife. And what a unique perspective, right? To hear the husband and wife dynamic on what it's like to be a big league player, and then interviewing some of their favorite people and teammates and different people that they played with. I mean, they even had Clint Hurdle on, who was Matt Holliday's manager in Colorado. They've had Adam Wainwright. They've had Jack Flaherty. They've had Nolan Arenado. They even had Ben Roethlisberger, the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback, on their show. So Table 40 is a must listen. I hope you guys are checking it out. Again, part of the Sports Spectrum Podcast Network. All of these shows can be found at sportspectrum.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time right here on the show. My name is Jason. Hope you all have a great rest of your day.